I feel like he does a nice balance of horror, but also themes that human beings can connect to.
Well, I wouldn't say Ari Aster's movies don't have themes that human beings can
I wouldn't say that either, but I'm sure they're a little more apprehensive to connect to them.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, if you're trying to say that they're not accessible, yes.
Yes.
Ari Aster movies are not accessible.
Yes, very, very true. And like I said, Mike Flanagan hits a nice medium where he can make stuff that's very scary, but at the same time, it has a tremendous amount of heart. And he proved that very, very well with The Haunting of Hill House.
Which I have not seen yet.
Which I absolutely loved. And he proved it to a small degree with a little film called Hush, which I also like quite a bit.
Okay. Also haven't seen. I don't think I've seen a single Mike Flanagan movie.
Yeah. No. Oh, wow. Okay, well, now
Gerald's Game have not. Well, until this, yes. Gerald's Game, Ouija, Origin of Evil. And my impression, correct me if I'm wrong, is that Flanagan works with mainstream studios to make what would normally be considered maybe grindhouse is not the right word, but low-hanging fruit.
Sure.
Like Ouija 2 Origin of Evil does not scream Oscar.
It's one of those examples of a movie where it's like... well, I wouldn't say like that may have been him initially, but like Ouija, like the sequel to Ouija is apparently like significantly better. Like apparently it's a good movie.
Yeah, no, that's what I've heard as well.
Like people were like, "Oh wow, this is actually solid," and then a lot of people were impressed by Oculus, which I did not see.
Yeah.
So he's known for like just having like solid movie after solid movie.
Yeah, but elevated trash almost.
Yes, exactly. Like even if it's not great, it's at least a solid, entertaining little horror flick that is a lot better than it has any right being.
Yeah.
And then he's offered Dr. Sleep, and I'm like, perfect for this guy. This seems right in his wheelhouse, especially after seeing Hill House. Yeah,
I think Gerald's Game was the big one here. Either Stephen King had a familiarity with him that worked, and maybe he was comfortable with Flanagan attempting it, or the studio had just seen it, and they were like, yeah, this guy makes good Stephen King adaptations. Let's give him another one. Mm-hmm. That seems like the archetype,
probably, and but it was also greenlit after It was such a success,
right?
So they were very on board with this.
Oh, it's Stephen King season.
Oh yeah, for better or worse.
Did you see the HBO trailer for The Outsider? Is that what it's called, The Outsider?
No, I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, they're doing that as a miniseries.
Okay, we got more.
Oh, plenty more where that came from.
And this is one of the more interesting sequels to come out in a while because it has a near impossible task.
And what would that task be?
Well, first of all, you're adapting a novel that is a sequel to The Shining, but then you're also doing a sequel to a very, very popular movie that the original author kind of despises.
Yes.
So the troubling thing is trying to make a faithful adaptation to Dr. Sleep, but also do a movie that sort of works in line with that version of the original story that the author hates, and trying to, as many people have said, reconcile the differences.
Yes, you have to make a sequel to both the Shining novel and the Shining movie, which are very different works.
And It's wonderful to look at. I don't know how Mike Flanagan approached it. But I hate to say it, and I don't know if you're going to agree with me. You might be totally against me on this. Honestly, it really worked for me.
Okay.
It really worked for me. I don't think the movie's flawless by any stretch of the imagination, but I remember it's just sitting there and being like, like this could have gone so wrong, and it could have been so flat to me. It could have not cared as much as it does. It could have been just like solely uninterested with The Shining, or even more uninterested with Dr. Sleep, and just been completely bananas. But I mean, there's a lot of like solid attention given to the characters and the story, and a lot of time, which shows with the runtime of the film. And I just think some really solid horror filmmaking and some great atmosphere. And you would, in my opinion, you would have looked at that third act and thought, okay, this is such too much homage, too much riffing off of that original. It's almost like
nostalgia bait.
So much to the point of being egregious. And I thought that's what I was going to get. And then I saw it, and then they get to the bar scene, and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, Nico, but I'm on board.
Okay. Of course I hated this movie.
Oh, boy.
Of course I hated it. Do you know me? Do you know me?
Yeah.
Of course I hated this movie. I'm sorry to rain on your parade.
It's too bad.
I really didn't care for it.
Okay.
I actually found myself checking my watch often.
That's too bad.
In the theater. Not necessarily because I was bored, but because I was pissed off, and maybe that's worse.
Really? Okay.
I'm not sure what's worse.
Okay.
Perhaps I'd rather be pissed off than bored.
Okay.
I don't think this should have been made. I think that's where I'm coming to.
Okay.
I don't think this should have been made.
And that might be right.
Here's why. You're right. This is an impossible task for Mike Flanagan.
Yeah.
And perhaps that should have been the end of the conversation. Impossible task, so let's not try it. That wasn't the conversation. Instead, Flanagan tried again to circle the square by making both a Stanley Kubrick movie, or Stanley Kubrick homage, I should say, and a Stephen King movie. On one front, yes, I think Mike Flanagan is a very good director of Stephen King's material, and understands how to articulate his specific vision on screen. I do not think, however, Mike Flanagan is a good steward of Stanley Kubrick style whatsoever.
Okay.
I think, in fact, his directorial style is quite different from Kubrick.
I don't think it was trying to ape off of Kubrick, though. It never felt that way to me.
Well, it certainly had a lot of the same imagery. In fact,
there were some shots that were Easter eggs and some homages. It never felt like there
were scenes directly ripped from The Shining that were just done again.
I know that. It never really felt like it was out of place, though. It felt like it's something that was fairly welcome in this universe. It never felt. But the thing that really sold it for me is that tonally it's completely different than a Kubrick film,
right? And
in a sense that I don't mind if it's trying to sort of recreate those ideas when they go back to like the Overlook, for example, because it's as far as like trying to illustrate a mood of that hotel and a level of familiarity that we got that was very, I mean, essentially perfectly illustrated by Kubrick's version. It didn't necessarily feel like a bad thing for him to call back. I don't know. It just felt like the proper way to go back to this place.
Okay. If you want to go back to the place, fine. Go back to the place. But again, the styles are so drastically different.
Why is that a problem?
Well, because it's a sequel.
So
I guess this is maybe the larger question then. What do we want out of a cinematic sequel?
Because I wanted it to be very different.
Okay, well, that's a complicated question to answer, right?
Yeah.
Because on one hand, you can say, same character, returning to the same universe, the sequence of events happened after the first film, that, by definition, is a sequel. And
sure.
Okay, I suppose. To me, there's a little bit more that goes into it. Right? To me, there's a little bit more. There's a feeling, there's a mood, there's a tone, there's imagery, there's a style that's supposed to feel of a similar piece to the original to a certain extent. That's the way that I view a sequel. Like, if The Godfather 2 became like a buddy comedy, even if it was like a Midnight Run level buddy comedy, I would still not like Godfather 2 because it didn't feel like it's in the same spirit as the original Godfather.
I wouldn't even necessarily say that this doesn't feel like it belongs to that universe.
Okay.
I was more like looking for it to feel like it could belong to this world that was established but still feel like its own thing and still have a similar like sense of dread that looms over everything. I wasn't looking for it to literally be The Shining. I mean, Stanley Kubrick's vision is so unique to Stanley Kubrick,
certainly,
that it's I feel like you're wasting your time even trying to ape off of it.
Well, I don't want them to rip off Kubrick. That's certainly not what I want. And I don't want just a bunch of scenes rehashing the same ideas and preying on the audience's nostalgia. That's not what I'm asking for. What I am asking for is something that at least feels of a piece. Like, if I'm reading this as a book and I turn the page to another chapter, I wouldn't get whiplash from it.
Sure.
You know, I need it all to feel part of the same larger story.
But it's a different story is my thing.
That's fine if it's a different story. But again, it doesn't feel like the same people wrote these two stories. It feels totally different.
I'm fine with that, though. I don't have any issue with that. That's sort of why I like Aliens so much. And Aliens, to me, feels nothing like Alien. It doesn't even look like Alien, if I'm being completely honest. But the level of difference and the thematic implications that carry over are sort of what make that sequel so interesting to me.
Okay.
So that's
maybe Alien is the notable exception. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm serious. Like the part that was oddly sort of what I was thinking, because in a way this is a little more. I mean, it's a lot more action packed than anything you get in The Shining.
Of course,
it's much faster and edited far quicker, and there's even a shootout sequence.
There is,
which is a little but But I thought, like, as a sequel, I actually deeply appreciated the fact that it wasn't just ripping off Kubrick the whole time. Because to me, even when they do play into the scenes at the Overlook, the way they play out ultimately and the way they use those locations is very different. You know, and there's a lot of interesting role reversals that, if you think about it, mean a lot more than you would have thought otherwise. And I thought it was very clever. Yeah, I suppose if you can separate yourself from The Shining enough, it's
you've got to do that.
Yeah, I don't think it's like it. I don't think it doesn't. I wouldn't go as far to say as though it has no relationship to The Shining.
Well, it has a relationship in that The Shining is the original text, and Dr. Sleep is riffing off that text.